I'm Denise McGregor. Despite my name, I am Denise McGregor, Manager of Social Statistics Transformation at Statistics New Zealand. The previous session in here was about the census. We're now looking at the surveys that follow the census. So the post-enumeration survey that checks the quality of the census, the post-censal surveys of Māori culture and disability, and we're also having a look at some of the characteristics of online completion within the 2013 census. So we're going to start with Joel Watkins. Joel is the project manager of the 2013 post-enumeration survey. Joel. We'll go through the presentations and then have time for questions at the end, if that's all right.
All right, now I'll work this. All right, well, welcome everybody. It's great to be here. So perhaps I'll just see if I can get this to work. What do I point it at? Is here. All right, here we go. Great. So on my allotted 10 minutes, is that how much time I've got?
Exactly.
And do I get a 1 minute warning or something? Okay, so we'll talk briefly about the survey history and purpose, a quick update on progress, and then looking at some of the improvements that we've got in place or are looking at for 2013. So first off, what exactly is the Census Post-Enumeration Survey? To give it its full title, it'll probably be the only time I do it today. From now on, it'll just be the PES. So it's a household sample survey to measure the level of coverage in New Zealand census. The 2013 edition is the fourth such survey that we've run. The first one was back in 1996, so it's a relatively recent thing. And so how do we run it, you might ask? We interview at selected dwellings spread across New Zealand. We ask the residents within those dwellings a number of questions, demographic type questions, name, age, sex and the likes, and also some address related information in terms of where they usually live, where they were on census night and whether they filled in a census form. This enables us to search for them in the census records to determine if they were in fact counted. Given the PS provides a check on the accuracy of census, it's important to note that processes and systems are in fact independent of the census. So for example, we select the sample from a separate frame, and Census don't know which areas the PES is going to visit. The outputs that we produce are gross measures of undercount and overcount. I'll go on to that shortly. Not quite yet. We'll build up to that one. And so we do an overcount and an undercount figure. As you might imagine, the undercount tends to be bigger. There's not too many people that fill in forms twice, but it does happen. But it is a lot easier to miss people. And then the headline figure, which being the net census undercount, is the gross undercount less the overcount. So why do we bother with the PES? Well, it's important for a number of reasons. It's a key input to the estimates and projections which are produced after every census, and it essentially kicks off a 5-year cycle. You have the census, you have the PES, and then you have a whole raft of population estimates and projections which get produced basically up to and beyond the next census after that. It's a KPI for the census program itself. The census has one of its key aims is to count everyone in New Zealand on census night, so the PS provides an independent measure of how close they got to that goal. It also informs users about the quality of the census data, which is obviously important, and also provides some useful information for future census processes. And that, I guess we'll probably come to that soon, but census coverage is not uniform. So it might well be that there's targeted strategies that Census can use or think about using to boost coverage in sort of some of the poor areas. So I'll just perhaps preface this by our original intention was to release 2013 numbers yesterday, in fact. So I could have easily filled my allotted 10 minutes talking about that today, but we're still working through some of the improvements that we're making. There's the complexities involved. So at the moment, all I can show you is 2006 numbers, but yeah, I guess let you know that we are working on it, and the 2013 numbers will be out soon. So what do we know from what does 2006 show us? Well, generally census coverage is very good in New Zealand, compares very well internationally. We've got a 2% net undercount, which is fairly consistent since going back to 1996. It's been thereabouts 2%, which equates to 80 in 2006, 81,000 people, and you can see there, which I indicated before, that the undercount tends to be a lot higher than the overcount. Overcount occurs, there's a couple of ways that it can occur. If people are overseas on census night, but they complete a census form before they go or after they come back. So in fact they shouldn't be included in the census, but they've filled in the form. But you can also get a lot of other reasons, shared custody arrangements, where parents might not know who's filled in the form, so they'll both do it. And then, of course, in the undercount, you might capture it where no one did it because they thought the other one was going to do it. So there's a few sort of things that do make it difficult in terms of getting out there and counting the population. So that's the national picture. Let's have a quick look at the sub-national picture. So I work for statistics, so I'd have to throw some graphs in there at some point, wouldn't I? So you can see that there is a bit of variation. The males tend to be harder to count than females, so you can see that on the top left there. No. Oh, here we go. So male, female there, and then by age groups, that one there sort of kind of stands out, doesn't it? Young adults, highly mobile population, hard to count. Not just in census, I think you'll find that there's a lot of different areas where that's they might be underrepresented, I should say, but fairly consistent across all the other age groups, sort of between 1% and 2%, whereas the young adults are closer to 4%, and that's sort of fairly consistent across time as well. By ethnicity, the Maori, Asian, and Pacific populations all tend to be higher than the national total. And the European is sort of quite a bit under that. And by area, you can see some variation. As much as anything, I think that's due to the different demographics of the areas rather than any other characteristics associated with those areas. So in the North Island, you do tend to get a younger population, and you tend to get sort of some of these other a high proportion of these other ethnicities in that area, which sort of goes some way to explaining that. Just a quick note on it's a sample survey, so we've got sampling error bars on the graph here, just indicating the range at 95% confidence level. So you can see that and this was based on a sample of 11,000 dwellings. So some of the sampling errors do get quite high, and it often depends on the size of the population that you're talking about. So you get sort of quite a nice tidy little one for the European population, which is obviously a very big population, but substantially bigger for the Asian population there. How are we going for time, Denise?
3 minutes.
All right, so we better shoot on to some of the things that we've been up to for 2013 in that case. So we're up to now. We've already done the interviews. We go out soon after census. Basically, as soon as the census field operation is finished, PES interviewers move in to try and make sure that people still remember where they were on census night, but also the fact that we're not getting in census way, that we keep those two processes independent. So that was last year. The second half of last year, we did the matching. And that's where we've sort of made one of our chief improvements, if you like. When you're talking 30,000 plus respondents, plus 15,000 dwellings to match, there's quite a bit of work to do there. So hence you see that took us a few months last year once we were able to access the census data. What we're working on now is trying to get those data out to you, the users. And not only the census undercount, but also the census substitute information as well, which goes hand in hand in terms of the response, the overall response to census. What else we got here? And of course the release of the new base estimated resident population, the historical revisions that go along with that, and of course kicking off the cycle of estimates and projections. That's the first release of the updated estimates is scheduled for August. That's still on schedule for August, so that's all on track, despite some of the earlier delays. Okay, so we're going to race along here. So I've talked a little bit about the matching. So we've brought in an automated procedure so that we don't have to match 50,000 records manually by looking at one form. Is that the same person? Is that the same dwelling as the corresponding census record? We've introduced data integration software so that we can match 80-odd% electronically without any human interaction, which has been fantastic. And it's meant that we've really managed to improve the matching procedure with the manual follow-up to really focus on the hard-to-find people. But it's also, and we also ran a matching impact study, which is a quick study on our old method to gauge the level of the difference, to make sure that we're looking at real-world change, but we're also aware of what impact the methods might have, and the fact that it might also affect our time series. Last slide, I think, Denise. So this one here is, and this is sort of where we were in at the moment, is in terms of the estimation and incorporating an estimate of the non-contact sector, which is census substitutes and late returns. So substitutes, for those of you who don't know, is where there's evidence. Census have got some evidence of people being at a dwelling, but they haven't managed to get a form. So a substitute record is created, and a limited number of variables are imputed. So it's got reduces bias, but it tends to increase your sampling error. So it is an improvement, but we're still sort of working through it, the details of it at the moment and the complexities. And also we're aware that there could be some impact in terms of historical revisions to population estimates, time series and the likes. And we will be updating the calendar very soon with a new release date.
The next speaker is Nicky Morton. Nicky is a statistical analyst with our census output section, but she's also worked on questionnaire design for the 2013 census, and she's going to talk about the characteristics of online responders to the 2013 census.
So as you're probably aware, and we also heard yesterday, in the 2013 census, just over 1/3 of respondents chose to complete their forms online. And this was up from 7% online uptake in the 2006 census, and it came just shy of Statistics New Zealand's target of 35% for 2013. And the census team has recently completed some research to understand which types of people were more or less likely to respond online as opposed to on paper. This work will inform planning decisions for the next census and other household surveys, but it's also interesting to look at the patterns of internet preference in New Zealand using a very large data set which we have at our disposal. These results have been published in a recent paper out a couple of weeks ago. It's available on our website. It also looks at some of the behaviours of online respondents to the census. But today I'll give you a quick tour through some of the most influential characteristics on the likelihood of online response. So this table just shows the total number of forms received online and the proportion of the total forms received. So just under 2 million dwelling and individual forms were submitted online for last year's census. 40% of these online forms were submitted on census day, and at the peak on census day at around 8 p.m, forms were coming in at a rate of about 130,000 per hour. So as you can see, the total online response rate, according to this particular methodology, came in at 34% exactly. This graph shows the distribution of mode choice according to 5-year age groups. So you can see the average online response rate in the dotted line, and after the age of about 40, we see online response decreases steadily as age increases. Before then, we've got a lower than average online response rate for respondents aged 15 to 24. And the age group that had the highest online response was people in their 30s who responded at a rate of 43% online. You'll see from this graph that there was very little difference in the online uptake between males and females. This graph shows the online response rates by ethnic group. Now what we've done, because ethnicity is something that you can belong to more than one category at the same time, for each of the 5 top-level ethnic classifications, we've broken the population into 2, so you're either in the ethnic group or you're not. Now if you responded that you were of the ethnicity in question solely or in part, then you're counted in the dark blue bars as in the ethnic group. Otherwise, you're in the light blue group, so that way we can compare without counting some people more times than others. So you'll see that Asian and respondents of Middle Eastern, Latin American and African ethnicity were more likely to respond online than those not in those ethnic groups. The opposite for Maori and Pacific peoples, who were less likely to respond online than non-Maori and non-Pacific peoples. And for European and non-European respondents, the online uptake was about the same. About 2 in 5 respondents who were born overseas completed the census online, and this is quite a bit higher than the online response rate for New Zealand-born residents. This graph includes everyone in New Zealand on census night, including visitors and usual residents. Looking at the birth countries that had the highest online response rates, you'll see South Africa there at the top of the table, but also Taiwan, Hong Kong, India, Malaysia, Zimbabwe all recorded online response rates of more than half. And there was a real consistent pattern among sort of Southeast Asian countries, the subcontinent area, and also African countries having consistently high online response rates. This graph shows the mode of response by highest qualification. This turned out to be quite a strong predictor of mode choice. The online response rate increases pretty steadily as the respondent's highest qualification increases, with the one exception to the general trend occurring at the level 4 certificate level, which had a slightly lower response rate online than those with a level 3 certificate. Tertiary graduates that were the most likely to have completed their forms online were people who had studied information technology. They responded online at a rate of 56.4%. Natural and physical sciences was 49.6%, and management and commerce came in at 48%. Here we have the distribution of mode of response by personal income. So again, this was a pretty good predictor of online response. The higher your income, the more likely you were to complete the census online. We did do some multivariate analysis in addition to these basic breakdowns, and we found that this variable interacted quite strongly with work and income, work and labour force status. So the likelihood that you have responded online depends on which combination of work and labour force status and income group you fall into. And you'll see there that the trend sort of goes backwards from the $15,000 mark downwards. Interesting to note that those respondents who reported receiving 0 income for the year to 31st March 2013 were more likely to respond online than those with income up to $40,000 for that same period. Unsurprisingly, people who had internet access available at their census night address were more likely to complete the census online. But we do see that a small number of respondents without internet access nonetheless did complete online forms. Lots of ways this could have happened. We know that a lot of respondents completed forms at work, at community places such as libraries, friends and family members' houses, for example. But so it's important to keep in mind that when we say 34% of respondents to the census last year did so online, if we're thinking about just those who really had the opportunity to do so, 42.1%. Here I have compared the rate of internet access by age group to the online response rate. So the toolbars, the light blue, show the proportion of individuals who had internet access at their census night dwelling. So we can see that overall about 80% of respondents had internet access available to them, but just 40% of respondents aged 80 years or over who were in a private dwelling had internet access there. So while only 1 in 10 respondents aged 80 years or over completed the census online, if we were to consider only those in this group that had internet access, then that online response rate doubles to 1 in 5. Here we've mapped the geographic distribution of online response. So the darker the area unit, the higher the online response rate, with those of the darkest areas coming in at over 40%. It's hard to see from this graph, but we do see clumping of those high response areas in the urban areas. So this shows Auckland by area unit, and as you can see, there's quite a lot of high online response there. The Auckland local boards that had the highest online uptake were Howick, Aoraki and Upper Harbour, who all had response rates over 45%. And the lowest came from Otara Papatoetoe, Mangere Otahuhu and Great Barrier Island, who all responded online at a rate of less than 30%. Finally, we did measure the online response rate by the urban-rural profile of respondents' census night address, and you'll see that main urban areas and rural areas with high urban influence had both the highest online response rates to the census, but also the highest proportion of households with internet access. So we saw a strong correlation, as you would expect, between internet access rate and online response rate. That's the end. Just to let you know that in the paper that's available on our website, looks at more variables, also, as I mentioned, some multivariate analysis, also offers comparisons with 2006, the general profile of New Zealand internet users, and also international censuses.
Our next presentation is from Scott Ussher. Scott's a senior analyst with the post-census surveys. These are the surveys that use the census as a sampling frame. So Scott.
Thanks, Denise. Kia ora tātou. I actually feel a little bit inadequate now. I work for Stats New Zealand and I've got no graphs in my presentation. Joel and Nicky have kind of shown me up. But unfortunately, we don't yet have any data out from our post-census survey, so it's a little bit of an excuse. What I am going to talk about very quickly is how difficult it is for us to survey or look at small population groups, and then I'm going to briefly explain the progress where we are at with our 2 post-census surveys. At Statistics New Zealand, we regularly get requests to collect information about specific groups of New Zealanders that relatively are quite hard to get to. That is, they make up quite a small proportion of the population. A lot of examples of this, but one recent thing is there's a great deal of interest around local councils and the people who live in them, and it's one area we kind of at times struggle to look at. And while the census is a powerful tool for looking at these populations, we are limited in the amount of information that we can collect from the census. And that is why we use a range of surveys to collect more in-depth information about people in New Zealand. However, these surveys are primarily designed to collect information in estimates about people at a national level. And when we start to look at smaller populations within these surveys, we run into trouble with our quality of our estimates becoming dubious. Because the general rule is the more people we survey, the higher quality estimate or the better quality estimate that we get out of that. So looking at smaller population groups in our surveys is a problem because we only have small numbers. So for example, the number of Māori that are surveyed in the General Social Survey is only 1,200. This is just a matter of that we only collect 8,500 people, respondents, and there's only 15% of those are Māori. If we wanted to collect a higher number of Māori in the General Social Survey, if we wanted to collect something like 5,000 people to be able to do something more interesting around analysis, we would have to collect around 35,000 respondents in the General Social Survey. And that's just not going to happen. It's not cost effective for Stats New Zealand to do something like that. So there are a number of potential ways we can approach this challenge. Each has its own benefits and limitations. I'm going to skim over the top 2 because it's not really what I'm here to talk about, but But just to say, there are things we could do other than you doing a post-census survey. We could do boosted samples where we could adjust our sample design to ensure that we get more of our small population than we would normally expect in that survey. But really, we would only get quite small gains in numbers through this method, and in terms of making big gains, it's not really worth it. We could also do something called small domain estimation, where we would use statistical techniques to generate more accurate estimates of these small population groups after a survey has been run. And while Statistics New Zealand is always investigating these techniques, we're still a little bit away from having a suitable solution for any of the things we're interested in at the moment. The third option is post-census surveys, which Census provides a unique opportunity to run a large survey of a small subgroup of the population in a cost-effective way. Using the census as a frame provides a degree of coverage in the population which is not matched by any other methods. Filter questions in the census, are used to directly identify people in our small population group. And I'll talk a bit more about the two population groups we've done in the next slides. In addition to this, information collected from respondents in the survey can be linked back to their census responses, and this minimises respondent burden and also helps us to reduce data collection costs because we're not collecting as much information. In 2013, we ran 2 post-census surveys, Te Kupinga and the 2013 Disability Survey, to collect information specifically about Māori and disabled people. And I'm just going to give you a bit of an update on both of them, starting with Te Kupinga, which is Statistics New Zealand's first survey of Māori wellbeing. The survey is informed by a Māori worldview and gives an overall picture of the social, economic and cultural wellbeing of Māori in New Zealand. Information collected in Te Kupinga includes the wellbeing of the Māori language, strength of belonging to things like ancestral marae, iwi, hapu, whānau wellbeing and social connectedness measures, ways people express their Māori identity, and plenty more. We collected information from 5,500 New Zealanders between June and August last year, and we used the 2013 census to identify those people who stated they were either of Māori descent or Māori ethnicity. The first release for Te Kupinga is scheduled for the 6th of May this year, in which we will use information to provide descriptive statistics on te reo Māori, tikanga, customs and practices, whanaungatanga, social connectedness, and spirituality. We're doing this first release in both English and te reo, and after we get this first release out, the data set's basically open for business, and we will continue work on a range of other products, including a more in-depth report on te reo, which will come out sometime in July. The 2013 Disability Survey will collect information on people living with and without impairments in New Zealand. The information collected provides a picture of how many disabled people live in New Zealand, the nature and cause of their impairments, the level of support they need, and how they are faring compared with non-disabled people. There's also, I think for the first time in 2013, we've collected a lot more of social outcomes data in the disability survey, which will be quite new and closely related to the Te Kupinga survey and the general social survey. We collected information from around 18,000 New Zealanders between July and October 2013. And again, we used 2 filter questions from the 2013 census to oversample or target people with disabilities. The first release, which is scheduled for 17th of June 2014, will focus mainly on the prevalence and nature of those disabilities.